And you know what it is? It's your man 50 Grand Mo Day in the building, yo. Nothing is impossible. I'm possible. That's how we do it around here today. Yeah. So you know what it is, man. It's story time with your man, bro. We are live story time. We are reading the Look for Me series. Look for me, I will find you. I'm waiting for my partner to get on here, but also let me make sure that I what's going on here? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Oh yeah. Going to my YouTube. What's going on here? I don't know what that was. That was weird. Oh, wrong channel. Here we go. This should be the live, right? Should be the live. Wait. Here we go. Okay. So I should be able to share. Here we go. Okay. So all right. Now watch this. Should be able to share. Here we go. Hey yo, bro. Okay. So all right. Now watch this. Should be able to share. Here we go. Hey yo, bro. Okay. So all right. Now watch this. Should be able to share. Digital Arts Gang. Okay, so what I did was I just what's going on here? All right. So I'm going live. Yeah, so this is story time with your man 50 Grand. You already know what it is, man. You know what it ain't, man. What's goody with everybody, man. We are doing story time. Yeah, man. Get childish with me. Huh? We reading books. Hey, we are reading books in here. Look for me. I'm trying to tell y'all, man, look at that. Look for me. So we're trying to make this. So there's a lot of people that want to know what this whole thing is about. Hold on, I got my partners in here. What's up, D? What is up, Mr. Guest?
Hola, amorcita, ¿cómo tú estás?
Nada.
In the building, yo, for real.
Neighbor zoom in.
I'm make people fall in love tonight, man. I'm telling you, it's a story. I'm trying to make a movie of this.
You're clicked in on the wrong thing.
Trying to sell this story.
What's up to all my people on IG? What's good to all my YouTube people?
Y'all bear with me.
Mr. Guest, what are you doing?
I got two images of myself.
YouTube going.
So it sounds like you are on the last one. What's up to the Instagram people? What's up, man? Get childish with your boy.
A little bit behind. It's all good though. It's my podcast. The hell I want to. Don't you ever tell me what to do with my damn podcast again, ever.
I don't understand. I'm hearing your voice, but your mouth is not moving.
Be punctual. You know what I'm saying? People be looking forward to me and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And I can't afford to be late. So, yeah. But I'm here though, and you know I'm looking well, living large, still buff, still swole, still got my no steroids, no supplements. I don't supplement. I'm telling y'all, man.
That was the old one.
Anything else? You never tell y'all, man. Eat y'all fruits and vegetables, man.
That was the last one.
I take a shake every morning. I fast and I drink a shake. It consists of like celery and blueberries and raspberries and blackberries and strawberries, and that's where I get my sugars from. And every, come on, man, a homemade chocolate chip cookie don't hurt nobody. That's like my, everybody got to have their thing. That's my thing. Yeah, man. Can you imagine? I eat one solid meal.
That's still the same thing.
and
That's
then
still
I
the
have a shake, and then I don't eat anything after that. And I've been in better shape now, almost 50 goddamn years of age. You know what I'm saying? Trying to than I ever been. I was one of those bulk up, I got to bulk up guys. You know what I'm saying? I was one of them, eat 5-6 meals a day to bulk up. That's a whole lot of work. Listen, I mean, I looked fantastic then. I was in great shape.
Can't you X out of that?
I mean, I was real big. I was thick.
Because you're playing a replay. You're live, but you're doing oh, I lost him. Okay, so I was supposed to be joined by another friend. Let me see what's going on here. Let me check my messages. Not my messages, my messages. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's that. So let's see what happens. Huh? Cool. So that's Instagram. All right. So yeah, for those people that are checking it out, man, listen, we're working on trying to film this. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are like, oh man, the books look great, this and that, this and this and the other thing, but it's not enough books flying off the shelf to get this thing going. So we're working on, if maybe we have like a reading time and we read the stories, people would be interested in it. They'd want to check the books out for themselves. And then that would kind of help move things along. We also have the Creep Tales saga that we're working on. It's the shirt right behind me. Get it together. There. And I had to look at my hand real quick just to see what was going on. But we're trying to get the stuff filmed and everything. Are you with us?
Man, I don't know. Is this live?
Repeat after me. My name is?
My name is?
Yeah, we're live. So everybody is tuning in. We are doing the book series. Look for me. Look for me. Look at that. Look for me. See what's happening here? Look for me. Look for me. It is a fantastic 1,000-year love story. I have the collector's set. This is season 1. Y'all see season 1. Okay. Season 1. And then I have season 2. One of the models for us is in the picture. So this is an actual picture that was shot by the author. It's a fantastic photo of the model JoJo, who has also been a guest on the show. And eventually she would like to get on and read a couple with us. So yeah, man. How's everybody doing on my Instagram people, my YouTube people? Everybody, what is up? If you are trying to get in on the live, the links are in the comments. Let me see if I can.
Mo, I've got to start this out with something.
What? Go ahead.
So I want everybody to know this. I called Mo about 20 minutes ago, 15, 20 minutes ago, and asked for the link to the channel. And he said, oh, man, didn't you hear? I'm up in Canada. And I thought, what? We're not doing the show? And he said, no, I met this lady, and she flew me out here to Canada, and she's talking about the books. And her husband is an oil investor, and it looks like we're going to get some funding and so on. And I'm buying it hook, line, and sinker. I'm just thinking, hey, how come I didn't get a plane ticket? And,
right.
And then Mo says, no, I'm just pulling your leg. I'm an actor, remember?
Hey, it was good. I almost bought it myself, man. I was like, it was crazy. I was almost like, hey, this is, so.
I mean, he was down to the point of telling me what they were having for dinner and drinking and how they were talking about funding and all this kind of stuff. And
I really started to to really. I almost started to buy my own story. That's how good it was, y'all. But anywho, so I got a lot of positive reviews. I got a lot of good feedback on the conversations that we had last time. We were talking about the books, and then we ended up talking about a bunch of other stuff that people seemingly were really interested in. So they're interested in both the books, but they're also interested in some of the topics that we spoke of. Now, we're not going to get into a whole lot of details about everything we talked about. Feel free to click. What's up, Unc? Feel free to click. Go to my YouTube channel. And let me see. Let me go. Matter of fact, let me go get the link, and I'm gonna post the link. Hold up. Oh shit! I almost ended the live. Hang on. Let me just go get the link. That way you guys can click the link on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you can get all the updates on everything that we're talking about and everything. I am going to now I'm going to post the link, the YouTube link, in the comments. So check the chats and you'll see the YouTube link. If you want to come in and join us live on the panel, the host link is also on there. So feel free to do that there. Hold on a second. Instagram. I'm trying to get my I'm trying to get the link to the Instagram. Copy the link.
I'm going to step away from the camera, but I'm right here, 4 feet away. I can hear every word.
You got it. Okay, so I'm back. There's the so this is the YouTube channel. Feel free to log into the YouTube channel, subscribe to my channel, follow. We're going to do a lot of reading and stuff. We're probably going to be looking for a lot of actors on the YouTube channel. Anybody that's interested in being in a film, in helping this project, let's get her done. What is going on, everybody? How are y'all doing? I hope that you've had a great weekend and great week so far. I know the kids have, having been a 4-day weekend. They were off today and yesterday, and I know tomorrow is back to school. Anyway, I know I hate that too, because I hate having to get up and I'm a morning person. I just don't want to get up and have to do other crap. I want to get up and move around at my own speed. You feel me? I know y'all understand that. But yes, so the name of the book is Look for Me, I Will Find. The name, it's the Look for Me series. Look for Me, I Will Find You. We are now in chapter 7. So I'm going to get right into it, and then we can talk about other stuff after. But last time we got more into the other discussions than we did the book. So I promised that this time I would start off with the books, and if we wanted to get into anything else afterwards, we could do that. So I want everybody to dim their lights, get comfy, get cozy. Uncle Mo is about to read. So get childish with me, snuggle up, and let's get a bedtime story read to you. I don't care what your age is. Get a bedtime story read to you by Uncle Mo. All right? So this is chapter 7 in the Look for Me series, book 1, 1871, Pennsylvania. All right? Following me? So somehow, and again, if you want to catch up on what we're talking about, go to my YouTube channel, click the link, subscribe to my channel, and you can click on the videos, and you can go back and you can backdate so you can catch up on what we talked about, okay? Because I can't hold up the process reiterating all the time. All right. Love y'all. Follow me. Subscribe to the channel, please. Let's stick together. Let's do something different. Ain't nobody reading stories. Let's do it. All right. 1871, Pennsylvania. Somehow, another 17 years passed. The Civil War came and went. Lincoln was shot and the country mourned and then rebuilt. Darby was good with people, so he worked his way up to being in charge of one of the O. Henry construction crews. His work took him across America, building a frenzy of railroad lines. He became strong and resolute. He saw men die, and he held them as they spit blood from being crushed by the trellis, by trellis, or I'm not sure how much. Trellis. I'm going to say trellis. Trellis crossing timbers. He witnessed a man plummet to his death. The Irish built the rail lines that O. Henry designed, and the Iris suffered the hardships of cold nights, hot days, rain and mud, and blistering heat. By 1871, Darby had built enough rail to cross the country and was tired of that life. He was tired of living out of a tent and a wagon. Long gone was the idea of being a farmer, though he had saved some money and was thinking he could get work in Scranton and settle down. May was never far from his mind, and many a railroad tie had her name carved on them. So for those of you that don't know who May is, May was his sweetheart who snuck away from home in their native home of Ireland, came on the ship with him against her father's wishes, but she didn't make it to see America. She perished. She got sick and died of malnutrition, malaria, and other stuff she was sick of. So she never made it. And Darby is the guy who was in love with her. All right. Because, let's see, he never told, had her name carved on. He never told anyone about May. Lied and said he carved May because that was his favorite month. He missed her terribly and missed the idea of being with her. His American dream was mighty, but it was not the same without the sweet girl of his dreams. A new nation was being forged, and he was part of it, but he still had an emptiness inside that nothing could fill. He felt as though his soul was lonely, and only the work numbed him to the reality of having lost her. Steam engines ran on coal, and hang on, get the page stuck together. Hang on. It's a brand new book, so bear with me, y'all. Ran on coal, and the one thing Pennsylvania had was coal. So Darby moved back to Scranton and determined that he'd become a miner and live in a permanent place near the mine. Unlike some workers, Darby was older, 40 by then, and he had money saved. He did not have to live in a mine town. He found a place in Scranton, not far from a railroad he had helped build 20 years before. It was a small apartment owned by a kind landlord. Just a short distance from the train he would need to take to the mining camp. Work notices for coal mines were plentiful. Anthracite was in demand, but the work was tricky. Seams of coal did not run continuously, but sometimes would zig and zag and play out and then pick up again a few dozen feet lower or higher, depending on how the earth twisted it all together. It took a special sense and strong desire to mine anthracite. The idea of extracting coal from the ground appealed to Darby somehow. It was a challenge, and the ingenuity that it required, that attracted him. On a spring day in 1871, Darby made his way to the Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited, from which he had found a notice someone had told him was seeking foremen. Let's see. Let me see if I think I might have read that fast. Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited, from which he had found a notice that someone had told him he was seeking foremen. The mine was just outside Scranton, so the train journey was quick. A long string of men led from the train station up the road into the hills. It wasn't a great distance, but it was pretty steep. So Darby caught himself breathing a little deeper, having to catch his breath to talk with the men heading in the same direction. There were jobs for sure, they told him. The work in the mine was unending, and a good railroad. The work in the mine was unending, and a good railroad man had skills with timbers was always appreciated. Oh, and his skills with timbers was always appreciated. I knew I misread that. At the top of the hill stood a clapboard building that had been painted red when it was new, but had faded over the years to a crimson brown. The road was black from hauling coal down the slopes. It was a little chilly in the hills, and Darby noticed that he could see his breath as he puffed up the steep grade. Rays of sunlight peeked between two mountains on the horizon. He passed a corral of mules that were used to work the coal. Off in the distance were the telltale signs of a mine tall structures for handling hoists, rusted tin shacks, steel mine cars, railroad tracks, a huge breaker building and men. There were a lot of men. Darby found a bevy of workers standing in line at a doorway he was told was the office. They were all looking for jobs, some young, others a bit older, but no one was advanced in years as he. Darby tried to make small talk, but found himself distracted. Maybe quitting the railroad wasn't such a good idea after all. There he was in charge. There he was, the one interviewing potential laborers. There, he had a respected position. So lost in thought he was that he did not even hear the young woman from inside call. Next, when it was his turn to go inside, a man beside him poked him. "You gonna go?" "Yeah, sure," said Darby. "I didn't come all the way up here for nothing." Darby stepped into the building. His heavy boots pounded the wooden floor, and bits of mud tracked behind him. He stepped toward a long wooden table. It was covered with paper applications, most likely, and there were a couple of there were a couple of other men sitting in the room writing. 2 or 3 of them were talking. "Sir," said Mary Hilton, as she extended a form towards Darby, "you're going to need to fill this out first." Darby caught the woman's eye. She saw him holding a glance over ever so slightly. He could see a gentle peace in her icy blue eyes. She had a stunning beauty that took his breath away. "Sir," said Mary, "you need to—" "I'm sorry," said Darby, interrupting. "That's all right," she replied. "This application needs to be filled out." Darby looked at her eyes a moment longer. There was a bit of silence. "Do you need a pencil?" "Sure," said Darby. A small smile made its way onto Mary's face. She noticed that he noticed. Men looked at her all the time, but this was different. He was older than most who came in looking for work, with a rough handsomeness that comes from a man who would use his back to work but was fully capable of using his mind. When Darby took the pencil from her, her hand touched ever so quickly. It was a bit of a fumble on Darby's part.
Uh-oh.
It was a bit of a fumble on Darby's part. He was so enthralled at looking at her eyes, that he misjudged the distance to her hand. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, as he turned. "Where?" "Just sit anywhere you can find a place." Darby looked around the office. There was one vacant chair, but he decided to step outside anyways. As he walked through the doorway, he heard Mary call out again, "Next." As he sat outside, he wondered about her. What a beautiful girl to be working among all these rough, dirty men. She must be related to the owner, probably the owner's daughter or a relative of some kind. Darby smiled to himself. Inside, he felt good. It was good to be applying for work, and it was good to be seeking work from the company that hired that girl. Look at Darby already. You ain't filled out the application, Darby, and you already gaming. Look at you, Darby. All right. I appreciate that, man. It's my own company, man. Thank you. The application was just 1 page, but Darby had a problem. He had worked for Henry for years, had led men across the prairie, had been responsible for hundreds of dollars worth of payroll, but despite that, Darby still couldn't read. Dun, dun, dun. He never learned how. He didn't have the time or the need, or maybe it was both. But maybe Mary could show him. He had always worked for O. Henry and had never filled out a job application before. Darby looked up from the corner of the front desk where he was sitting next to the stairs. There was a steady line of men applying for jobs. Surely they could read, and the ones that couldn't weren't too proud to ask for help. But they were younger, some just in from Ireland. A couple of minutes passed as Darby considered his predicament. Would they hire him and put him in a supervisory position if he couldn't read? What if they hired him and found out later that he was a worker without any schooling? Then there was a tap on his shoulder. Darby saw a pair of feet beside him. "Sir," asked Mary as she stood over him. Darby looked up, a little startled. Yes? Do you need some help with that? Darby's mind flashed without an answer. He pointed at the document. No, I was just thinking about my answers. Mary smiled. She had seen that response before. Well, after you think about them a while, why don't you let me help you? I can get it, said Darby, trying to hide his secret. Mary smiled and put her hands over her hips. Darby looked at how beautifully shaped she was. Darby, you still have an application to fill out. I'll be fine, he reiterated. Suit yourself. Mary turned towards the line of men coming up the stairs. We're hiring for all mining positions, she said. Miners, nippers, driver boys. Applications are at the head of this line. If you cannot read the application, we will help you fill it out. Darby watched in amazement how this young woman took charge. She's talking to me, he thought. How this young woman took charge. She turned towards Darby, who pretended to be starting to fill out the application. Man, that man is stubborn. I can't read.
Well,
Sir.
you know, if you think about it, there's a lot of people during that era in our history there. You know, they don't want people to know.
Unc says, sounds like Unc. Let's see. Sir, I can help you. Sir, I can help you with that. I filled out hundreds of these, and I can ask you all the questioning by heart. Darby grinned at her. That would be very nice. Come on, she said. We've got an open table inside. Darby followed her back into the office, where he noticed that an older man had taken her place handing out applications. He looked strict and had a meanness about him. He hunched over the table where the top of his thinning hair could be seen. Have a seat right here, directed Mary. Have a seat right here, directed Mary, as she sat down across the corner of the table. Can you write it all? No, said Darby, softly, embarrassed. That's quite all right. There are no books in the mine unless you're the fire boss, and we're not really hiring for those. But I think I'll need that pencil more than you will. Darby smiled and handed it to her. First question, what is your name? Emmanuel Darby Connors. They made that up. Darby Connors. Is that with an E or an O at the end? Asked Mary. What? Said Darby. Connors. Is it Connors or Connors? Oh, said Darby. Date of birth. Shouldn't I know your name first? Asked Darby. Mary smiled. I already have a job. But what should I call you? You know how many times I get that every day? Well, today's a new day. Mary's tongue touched her lips slightly as she hesitated. A little flirting happening here. You guys see what's happening here? Okay. Her tongue touched her lip, huh? She come out of everybody else in line. She comes to Darby. A little bit of love here, I think. Okay, so Mary's tongue touched her lips slightly as she hesitated. So what kind of answer do you give when people ask you a question like that, insisted Darby. Mary laughed slightly under her breath. You're pretty persistent, Mr. Connors. All right. Well, that's how I get what I want, and I really want a job here. You know, you're older than most of these men here. This is hard labor. Really? I thought the coal just dug itself out of the ground and just jumped into all those rail cars and mules just hauled it to the cage without asking them. You know, ma'am, whatever your name is, I built the railroad that runs up to this mine, and I didn't do it with my back. I did it with my head. Steel rails and timbers are pretty heavy on a man's back after 17 years. So he learns how to use a block and tackle and let the weight of the object you're setting on a place to help you move it. Mary. Darby held his hand out towards Mary, and she shook it. Pleased to meet you, Mary. Mary of Pittsburgh Mining Company, Limited in Scranton, Pennsylvania. No, Mary's just fine, responded Mary with a little giggle. Now, there's a question you're going to have to answer for me. If I'm going to be an inside boss at this mine, Mary laughed a little at how sure he was about the job. Why in the world would a mining company located in Scranton, Pennsylvania, be called the Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited when we aren't anywhere close to Pittsburgh? It seems like it should be the Scranton Mining Company Limited. A big smile had taken over Mary's face. I guess that's just the way the owners wanted it. Say it isn't so, lass, said Darby. Even in America, things don't always make sense. How about the date of birth now? Darby liked this girl, this Mary, whoever she was. She was fun to joke with, and he could see she was entertained by his antics. He watched her carefully as she filled out the employment form. Her hands were sleek and pretty, and her handwriting was proper and neat. He judged that she was maybe 20 years old, if that, probably the daughter of somebody for sure, somebody who had an interest in this mine or ran the place. It didn't take long for the management of Pittsburgh Mining Company, Ltd., to make a decision about hiring Darby. They liked him because of his railroad experience, and there was one thing for sure about coal mining: somebody had to know what they were doing when it came to building tunnels for the gangways and reinforcing them with timbers. Also, it didn't hurt to to have a crush on the company's daughter. I just added that. I said be childish with me, y'all. All right. Darby had been told to wait, and by day's end, Mary's assembled a large collection of men at the office and read off a list of names. Almost everyone was hired. Few were not. Mostly blacks and people who the mining company just didn't feel like hiring. Darby's name was called. Was that racist right there?
That's racist right there. That is true history.
So the blacks didn't even get hired? You remember what was his name?
Historically, Mo, after the Civil War,
Yeah.
nobody would hire the black people. They didn't get their mule, they didn't get their 40 acres, and they didn't get any jobs.
But what happened to the one was this John Henry, the big black guy that could lay a railroad by himself with the big sledgehammer? Or is that just folklore?
That's probably one in 1,000.
Do you remember that story? He was his fate. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's a terrible delay in our conversation here.
Oh, so the question was, do you remember the story of John Henry?
Yeah.
He was as popular. I remember he was as popular around the time as Paul Bunyan. You remember him?
Yeah.
Folklore, huh? Okay. So,
well, I mean, look, they probably hired some black people, but the fact is there's a lot of black people that were able-bodied, probably stronger than their. They just flat didn't get hired.
Oh man. So 1871 was no different than
1971.
Okay. If you I didn't feel like hiring. Darby's name was called, and he was told that he would be going to work as an assistant to an inside boss. The pay was not as good as he had been used to at the railroad, but it was reasonable given that he had no mining experience at all. He could not earn the best wages as the seasoned miners did, but that was okay. In time, Darby would work his way up. He always did. 3 weeks passed before Darby saw Mary again. He had hoped he would run across her and always look toward the office when he made his way to work, and then again when he left at the end of the shift. When he finally did see her, it was pleasant for him because he was beginning to wonder if she had only worked there when they were hiring so many men. The mine had taken on new contracts and had decided to dig new tunnels to increase production. And as it happened, Darby's application was timed perfectly. They were even building a new shaft to reach a seam they believed was 750 feet below the surface. I have a feeling a sad story is coming on. I'm getting the feel 750 feet below the surface, starting to spell out a sad story on its way. In 3 weeks, Darby gained the respect of his inside boss, a man named John Julius, and the men started looking up to him. He certainly knew how to move timber and fasten it together. As he told them, if he could build bridges across ravines and steam steel engines across them, he could build tunnel structures that could hold up mountains. When he saw Mary, Darby waved and said hello. She did not respond. Maybe she didn't see him, but she did not look happy, and Darby thought she might have been crying. She was at the office, standing outside on the porch. Darby thought about stopping to speak to her, but he would have had to climb a long flight of stairs, and without some business with the office saying something just, let me see if I'm reading this right. Having to climb a long flight of stairs, and without having some business with the office saying something just to her might have been considered improper. Okay. As he walked, so just to clear that up, just he needed a good reason to go come talk to her, and it's just saying something to her out of the blue would have come off as improper behavior at the work site. All right, we see you, Unc. As he walked down the hill towards the train to take him back into town, he wondered about Mary. She was such a pretty girl. What was it that was upsetting her? Should he have stopped and said something? What would be so wrong with reaching out to her to comfort her in a time of need? The next day was a bad day for the Pittsburgh Mining Company. Darby had heard about it on the way to work on the train. The roof in one of the gangways where men walked and mules towed carts of coal had collapsed. Men were trapped. Said I had a bad feeling. Probably some dead. Darby's first hope was that no one was hurt, and his second was that the collapse was not in his area. When Darby arrived at the station, there were men everywhere. It seemed as though every miner, regardless of shift, was at the station or headed up the hill with gear clanging and hurry-ups shouted. Darby pushed up the steep grade with all his might. On the way up, he heard that the collapse was in number 32, one of the older seams, and there was no word. So hang on a second. And there was no word about survivors. There were crews being assembled, and men were already down below digging furiously to uncover and remove as much debris as possible. The hoist above was running the gunboat up and down continuously, one whistle to raise it and go, two to lower it. Men were all over the wood bonnet, keeping the hoist engine running, watching for overheating, getting the maximum out of the machinery. It was dangerous. It was dangerous work below because one collapse can always trigger another. And the gangway was dark with coal dust. Darby's assignment was to keep the debris moving, get it out of the mine as fast as possible, and dumped away from the entrance. Men were sent in to dig with picks and axe for 15 minutes, and then they were relieved. What they dug, others shoveled into small mule drawn rail carts. Can anybody hear me? My mic seemed to have gone out for a second. Mic check. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but the whole podcast today has been kind of dropping out. There's something not right.
Really? I'm all green lights. My internet source is right behind me, so I'm all green lights here. I don't know. It might be some weather. Are we expecting any weather? What's up, YFL?
It's not going to ever rain again. That's it. We've seen the last of the rain.
You think so?
It sure seems like it.
Yeah, I know. It seems like it's raining everywhere else except here, right?
Did you know that this is the driest it's been in Texas since 1917?
No, I didn't even know that history of Texas.
Yeah, we're about to break that record. If it doesn't rain soon, we're going to break that record.
That's crazy, man. And there's tornadoes, and not tornadoes, but hurricanes and stuff everywhere else.
Yeah.
Texas pissed somebody off. Remember all the hurricanes used to hit the Gulf?
Yeah.
Now they're hitting the East Coast and parts of Florida, stuff like that. And they're hitting up in the north, up in parts of Canada and Newfoundland areas. That's crazy. All right, let's continue. So everybody hears me? Okay, good. Let me see. Pig and axe. What they dug, others shoveled into small mule-drawn rail cars. These were whisked outside, and crews emptied them and sent them back in for refilling. 3 whistles meant that men were in the cage being hoisted down to relieve those sweating below. Good progress was made that first day, but there was a long way to go. The mine was always wet, but number 32 was particularly sloppy. It was tough work. Heads were counted, and it was determined that 35 men were trapped by the cave-in. Their names were carefully picked off a large pegboard that showed by brass button who was in and who was out. John Julius was in the mine when the roof caved in. The news surprised Darby because Julius had worked the last shift with him the day before, and he was not due to come back until later. They say Julius was in the mine. Darby asked as a line. They say Julius was in the mine, Darby asked as a line supervisor passed his rolling cart. Yeah, he was. What? What was he doing in there? Asked Darby. There was no answer. The trouble with the cave-in is the lack of oxygen. Anthracite seams can run miles into the side of a mountain. There was no way to locate the room from outside, much less any hope of drilling into it with equipment from above. If you're going to get the men out, you have to dig them out by hand and quickly. It was muddy work. The oxygen inside will last for a while, but depending upon how many men and how deep they were in the tunnel, it could be days or just hours. Mining accidents were common in the 1870s, but nobody ever liked them. The mining bosses hated them because production stopped, of course. It hurts the money.
Yeah.
Not the lives of your workers. Just you're pissed off because you're not making money.
Right.
Right? Okay. Stop production. The miners hated them because their colleagues often perished. Now that's a better reason. Darby had seen death before on the railroad, but the prospect of 35 men dying all at once in a single accident filled him with anguish. He had just gotten to know some of those men, and Julius had become a friend. It would be tough to lose any of them. Nightfall didn't stop the miners. Darby was told to rest with his crew, and new crews were brought on. The rule was that everybody digs and rests and digs and rests and digs and rests until the job is done. It could go on for many hours. What do you think happened? Darby asked one of the old timers. Same thing as always happens. What's that? Timber gives way, roof caves in. Not enough timber in most of these gangways. All these roofs are pressing, said the bearded miner as he pointed across the hill. Too big to hurry to get that coal out of here. His face was covered with black coal dust. The man turned and spit. I'm Darby Connors. He held out his hand. He held his hand out, and the old timer shook it. I'm working number 46, the new shaft up top. I heard about that. Some proud work up there. Yeah, we're enforcing everything real good, said Darby. Not like all these others, said the miner. These others were built too fast and weren't made to last. They just want us in and out with the coal before, let's see what he says, before the mountain shifts. Damn room and pillar mining. You cut it out and then you pull the pillars, wonder why the roof caves in. Stupid. That's pretty dangerous, said Darby slowly. That's why we have one of these about every 3 or 4 months. He pointed at all the men still working frantically to clear the mine in a nearby distance. This happens a lot then, asked Darby. You can bet your last greenback this happens all the time. He paused. I've buried a lot of friends up here on this godforsaken mountain, mining coal. Twice a boy, once a man. You start out breaking coal as a boy, you mine it as a man. And if you're one of the lucky ones to survive, you end up top breaking coal with the boys again. He paused briefly. They say the country runs on coal. Well, they need to slow it down before we're all killed. Darby nodded his head to agree. You think we'll get these men out? Yeah, we'll get them out. The question is whether or not they'll be breathing when we do. Darby looked over the commotion. He'd seen railroad accidents, but nothing like this. At least with a railroad accident, you have daylight here. There was nothing but darkness, and inside the mine there was pitch black and no oxygen. Darby fell asleep from exhaustion. He was startled when they awakened him for another go. He worked his next shift and then fell asleep again. So much for no longer sleeping in work camps like that at the railroad. Food was brought in and served off long tables. Men who were dirty got more and more dirty. Tons of debris was extracted by hand, hour after hour. The sun came and went. Then there was the yell, "We're through." What was frantic before became more so. One of the small men was sent in through a crawl space with a fuel lamp. He was gone for an eternity as Darby knelt with his men briefly. They didn't want to disturb anything while the man was crawling into the cavity beyond. Then there was some voices, more than one, so somebody was alive. 6 men died in that accident. 29 survived. John Julius came out alive, and Darby shook his hand as he crawled past and towards fresh air. The 6 who perished were handed out and passed from man to man. Darby did not know any of them, but his heart sank to see them. Their wives, their girlfriends, their lovers would soon know, and it would crush them. Darby felt tears well up in his eyes, but he fought them back. Others were not so lucky. Their faces streaked clean below their eyes. Man, that must have been tough. The days and weeks that followed were different. There was a flurry of activity and some kind of government investigation. It didn't amount to anything. The official ruling was that it was simply a mining accident. But that's not what most of the men thought. And when John Julius was made a scapegoat and fired, most were furious. Julius was a good inside boss. And the only reason he had gone into number 32 was to inspect some of the support structures brought to his attention by the fire boss. The fire boss always entered the mine 2 hours before the men to check for gas and to look for what water might have done to weaken the ceiling and the walls. He had signed off on the mine, but wanted Julius to go down and have a look at it while the men worked. It was known that Julius had learned some things from Darby, the railroad man, and was more thorough in his inspections. Ironic that the ceiling collapsed when Julius was inside looking. Firing Julius was just wrong. Hilton needed to blame somebody, so he blamed Julius. Darby was promoted to inside boss in the place of Julius. Some of the men were happy to see that, while others were convinced that he had no experience in the mines and would contribute to killing them. A few quit, but not many. Jobs were hard to get. Darby met the owner of the company, a one Clarence Hilton, who he remembered as the man who was receiving job applications on the day he had applied, and Mary was off helping him. Maybe Hilton was Mary's father. He was certainly grumpy, not nice at all. "I want the production to continue, Connors," said Hilton. "Get in there and shore the gangways up, but don't slow down the production. We have orders to fill." "Yes, sir. I've seen some of these gangways that are in pretty bad shape. To do it right is going to take some time," said Darby. "I'm a businessman, Connors. You know what a businessman does when production slows down?" "No, sir." "He goes out of business, Connors." "Do you know what that means, Connors? Do you know what happens when I go out of business?" "No, sir." "You lose your job, Connors. You and all those other men. You all lose your jobs." "Yes, sir." "So I want to run a safe mine, but a quick mine. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "You get these gangways shored up, but don't you interfere with my production." "Yes, sir." But when I move some timbers, I have to use the tracks, and you can't run the coal out when I'm moving timber in." "I suggest you move fast, Connors. You haul out a load of coal, and when they're digging more, you move your timbers in fast. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I'll do the best I can as fast as I can. Without production, Connors, there are no jobs. Tell the men that. You want to keep the mines open? You mine faster. All these repairs and delays cost us money. You understand that?" The last line was not a question, but a demand. Darby did not like Hilton very much. He'd seen owners like that on the railroad. They were all pretty much the same. Push, 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 regardless of how many men got hurt. When Darby left Hilton's office, what seemed like the start of a bad day improved dramatically. "Hello there," said Darby to Mary. "Hello, Mr. Connors." "You know my name," replied Darby with some surprise. "Filled out your job application, remember?" said Mary. "I remember it like it was yesterday, Mary. Let's see, Mary of Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited. Oh, so you remember my name as well," she replied. "I remember what you told me," he grinned. "And that's more than most of these men ever know," she said with a little teasing tilt to her head. Darby smiled. "Well, as you may recall, I'm not like most of these men. I build railroad bridges, and I'm doing it for Mr. Hilton inside these mountains." Darby gestured toward the outside. Mary's face turned a little tense when she heard the reference to Hilton. "You mean the boss?" she mimicked, tossing her head to the side and rolling her eyes. "The boss, Mr. Clarence Hilton?" "Yes, Hilton," said Darby with a smile. "Well, I work with the boss every day, Mr. Connors, and I want to tell you." At that, Hilton's door swung. Hang on a second. Swung open, and Hilton stood there glaring. He saw Darby flirting with Mary, if only for an instant. "Mary, my office. And Connors, I thought I gave you a job to do." "Yes, sir," said Darby as he turned and hurried out the door. He did not like that man. The work proceeded well. Darby thrived under pressure. He knew what needed to be done, and he encouraged his men not only to mine the coals, but to also improve the safety. They liked that about him. Miners got paid by the load they sent up. Each car numbered in white chalk, and the ticket boss above keeping track. Pay was tied to the quality of the coal and production. But safety was a concern for all the men below, and Darby was able to improve the gangways and at the same time keep mules driving out the coal. One man was killed in a dumb accident. He was a breaker boy, just 12 years old. Men were not supposed to ride on the spreader chain at the front of a cart being pulled out of the slope. Being pulled out of a slope mine with the cable hoist. But he was, and when his soft miner's cap and fuel lamp flipped off his head, he tried to reach down and grab it. He slipped, and the car ran over him. The men at the top of the engine house had no idea from the top cap what was happening down below, where they couldn't see. It wasn't Darby's slope, and it wasn't his responsibility. He was the inside boss for a shaft, but that didn't matter. The anguish of knowing that such a young life was taken away in an instant wrenched his gut. On the train home, he cried for the boy. Why, he wondered, were such young boys being allowed to work in such dangerous places? It was the work. People needed the work. But the boy was probably helping to feed his family. That's sad. A hand touched Darby's shoulder. "Mr. Connors?" It was Mary. Darby quickly rubbed the tears away, or out of his eyes. "I cried too," she said, fully understanding. "I said Darby. There was a silence. His name was Tin McLaughlin." Darby looked at Mary standing beside him as the train swayed. He didn't know what to say. He felt his throat tighten. "Did you know him?" "No," said Darby. "Did you even know his name?" "No, I didn't," breathed Darby, trying to conceal another tear he felt welling up in his eyes. Mary patted his shoulder gently. "It's all right." Darby looked up at her, and his eyes locked on hers. Tears rolled out of his eyes. Years of holding back things that happened flooded forward. Years of holding back things that happened flooded forward. He was embarrassed, but there was no way he could stop it. He lowered his head, and tears dropped onto his dirty overalls. "May I sit down?" asked Mary. Darby nodded his head and pointed to the smooth wooden seat across from him. They sat in silence momentarily, as Darby let the tears drop. Finally, he sniffled and wiped each eye one at a time. Mary just sat watching him. A tear slid from her eye. "This coal mine is just so dangerous," said Darby eventually, with a bit of anger in his voice. Mary nodded her head. "What's a 12-year-old boy doing riding the spreader chain?" Mary didn't answer right away. She understood. What's a 12-year-old boy doing in the mine in the first place? She asked assertively. The mine is no place for a boy. Half the breaker boys and the mule drivers were not much older, said Darby. They shouldn't be there at all, said Mary. Darby looked directly into Mary's eyes. She looked back. Her blue eyes, hang on a second, were older than her years. She knew. She understood. You work for Hilton, can't you? You work for Hilton. Can't you convince him that there are plenty of jobs for boys up top? Mary tilted her head towards the floor. He doesn't listen. Darby didn't hear her well because of the clack clack of the train. What? I said he doesn't listen. He won't listen. Mr. Hilton, the boss is a horse's ass. Darby was surprised to hear her say that. He smiled. You don't like him very much, said Darby. How about if I say I don't like him at all, responded Mary with assertion. That would be putting it plainly. Mr. Clarence Hilton is a horse's ass and a mean old slave driver who cares more about the money than he does about you or Timothy McLaughlin or me. Darby smiled. That is putting it the way it is. As a matter of fact, the mouth of a man needs to be on a train right now instead of me, said Mary, louder. Why? Mary held up an envelope that Darby had not noticed. I get to go up and tell Mr. and Mrs. McLaughlin why their boy isn't coming home this week. Now you would think that would be the job of the owner, wouldn't you? You would think that would be the least he could do when one of his men he employs is killed in his stinking mine. Darby looked around the passenger car. There were only a few people riding, but one or two had heard her raised voice. He didn't say anything, but Mary could tell that he thought she was talking a bit too loudly. They all know, she said, looking around at the other passengers. They all know what an evil man he is. They know Satan runs that mine. How are y'all hanging in there so far? Everything all right?
I'm not liking this Clarence Hilton, man.
I know. He's
liking him at all.
He's a jerk, man. He's definitely a jerk. Anywho, so Darby was shocked. Those were powerful words. He reached over to Mary to calm her. She sighed loudly. I'm sorry, Mr. Connors. You're such a gentleman. You don't know what it's like being surrounded by or being around someone who is as evil as he is. Darby touched Mary's hand. At first, it was a light grip, and then he gave it a reassuring squeeze. Mary looked suddenly at Darby. In his mind, Darby thought she would reprimand him, being so forward. He didn't consider his actions, but rather just wanted to comfort her. Mary approved. She didn't say anything, but her eyes thanked him. He held her hand a little while longer. The train pulled into the station, and he released his grip. Mary touched his hand as he pulled away. She stood up without speaking and turned to disembark. Darby sat and watched as she and other passengers made their way for the door. Darby felt strange. Not since his beloved Mary had he had any feelings like he was sensing at the moment.
Did it say his beloved Mary or beloved May?
Darby felt strange. Not since his beloved May, had he had feelings like he was sensing at that moment. And yet, Mary was such a young girl compared to him. His feelings had to be wrong. Mary glanced over at Darby. So when May died, that would have been 20-something years ago.
Yeah. 1850.
Yeah. And Mary was just 20-something as well. So that lets y'all know. Okay. Mary glanced over at Darby when she stepped out of the train. Darby was busy getting his lunch pail from under the bench. He did not see her. But as she walked by outside the rail car, she looked in through the window. There she caught Darby's eyes watching for her. She hesitated and then mouthed the word, "Thank you." Darby was surprised to hear a tap on his door at the boarding house a few hours later. Hardly anyone ever knocked at his door, especially after dark. Imagine his surprise when he opened the door to see Mary standing there. What's going on, Mary? Mary, you lost or something, Mary? You lost one of your little lambs, Mary? Have you? Yes, I seem to have misplaced one of my little lambs in Darby's bed. Continuing, her eyes spoke volumes. She was hopeful. Darby read her face. Mary, come in. Mary hesitated, then stepped through the door. What's wrong? How did you find me? Mary came in and helped herself to a chair sitting next to the lone table in the room. Darby looked around at his place apologetically. It was a man's apartment and was far from neat. I read the address off your job application, said Mary. Oh, said Darby, wondering the purpose of the surprise visit. Would you like some water? Darby asked. Sure, said Mary. Darby poured some water from a small can into a tin cup. He handed it to her. Mary took it with both hands and sipped. I guess you talked to Timothy McLaughlin's mother and father. Mary nodded her head. I bet that was rough, said Darby. There are no words to describe it. Darby moved a trunk closer to the table and sat next to Mary. I don't see why you have to do that. Mary openly cried. He had two little brothers, she said, starting to sob. They had little faces and big brown eyes. Mr. McLaughlin sent them out of the room. Miss McLaughlin started screaming. Darby reached out towards Mary, and she responded by grabbing him and pulling him towards her. She buried her head in his shoulders and shook as she cried. Darby patted her head. He had no idea what to say to her. He just held her. Minutes passed before she calmed. He's such a bastard, she said. I hate him. Darby didn't answer immediately. But then, who? He asked. My husband. Darby released his grip a little. Your husband? I didn't. Mr. Clarence Hilton, big boss, big mine owner, Mary paused. My name is Mary Hilton, she said, said the young girl. Mary clutched Darby harder. I didn't know that, said Darby slowly. Nobody knows, she said. He didn't think people should know. He's evil. Hilton is your husband and my boss, said Mary with disgust. Darby was uncomfortable and tried to let go of Mary. Hold me, she said Mary. At least you're a man. Darby gripped her. After a quiet moment, Mary leaned back and looked at Darby. I've watched you when you've come in to talk to him. I know how he treats you, how he treats everybody. But you stand up to him and you stick up for the men and for the boys and for people like Timothy McLaughlin. You're a bigger man than he ever will be. He may be the owner, but he is nothing. I'm not sure if you should be here, said Darby. Don't get angry with me, said Mary. I'm not angry, returned Darby. I didn't know you were married. It's all right. I'm not. I thought you just said Hilton was your husband. Oh, he is, but we're not really married. He treats me like just another one of his employees. He's so hateful to me. But you are married to him. Yes, I'm married to him, said Mary, irritated. Yes, I'm married to that miserable worm. But I don't have to love him, and he doesn't love me. He's never really loved me. I was just his young trophy, and I was just stupid. He swooped me off my feet, and I thought we'd have a wonderful life together. I was so young, and I was really wrong about that. I'm sorry, said Darby, his mind reeling. This girl he admired was married, and he didn't even know it. Darby watched as she clutched him and leaned her head on his shoulder. He could feel her breathing and felt nervous. Are you sure you should be here? He asked finally. I want to be here. Darby could not think. Mary was the first woman he had held in his arms since May, and it felt awkward. He knew he had been attracted to her since the day he met her, but the news of her marriage to the mine's owner was unsettling. His insides flipped. That bastard sends me on these errands of horror, and he does not care one bit about my feelings or what happens to me while I'm gone, said Mary, with resignation in her voice. Darby did not know what to do. Would you like some more water? He asked. Thank you, said Mary as she leaned back. Darby poured from his can into her cup. You're such a kind man, said Mary. Mary drank and then gripped Darby. He held her and rocked her. To her, it was heaven. Darby was a man who cared. He was a man who put his arms around her when she was hurting and did not need to talk. His warmth made her feel safe. They sat together for an hour or so, and then Mary announced that she had to go. Darby watched her as she left and closed the door. He didn't quite know what to think, but he knew he felt a closeness with her. Yet he struggled terribly with the idea that she was married and to, of all people, the boss. The men were at the mine were very angry the next few days. At first, no one knew Timothy McLaughlin's name, but it wasn't long before the men had become a cry for reform. It wasn't long before the name had become a cry for reform. Darby was fairly new to mining, but he was not new to the pitiful conditions of labor. At the railroad, men, let me make sure I got this page. At the railroad, men were expendable. If the job got done, fine. If it didn't, labor was blamed. Regardless of the conditions, the work went on. At the mine, it was the same, only worse. More men perished in coal mining in Pennsylvania than from any other cause. Hundreds of thousands worked around the country, digging coal, feeding the post-Civil War industrial giant. Immigrants continued to arrive in New York by the tens of thousands and were ready to work any job just to get a grip on the American dream. Talk started at the mine about organizing the men. Talk started at the mine about organizing, and the men turned to Darby for leadership. They wanted safety, more timber, and get in the gangways. I don't know if I read that right. They wanted safety, more timber in the gangways, some kind of control over who does what in the mine, better handling of open flames, a first aid station inside for the inevitable accidents, and shorter hours. God knew they needed shorter hours. Darby listened carefully and agreed. They could have all been fired for such talk, but that did not stop them. Conditions had to be reached at some point. That something had to be done. Okay, y'all hang in there with me. I'm trying to unstick some of these pages. Okay. All right. Darby agreed to take the complaint to Mr. Hilton. 3 of the other men agreed to go with him, but only 2 showed up on the morning they planned to speak with the owner. Milton Johnson was a miner, and Mason Appleby worked the hoist house. Johnson was a burly man, typical of a coal digger, with a stout build, rough bearded face, and cold eyes. Appleby was smaller, but still a man used to working and toughened by the responsibility of hoisting men and mules up and down the cage and bringing up coal by the cartload. It was a heavy responsibility, lowering men hundreds of feet into the earth in a cage on a single cable, and it was dangerous. Things could go wrong. As the 3 marched up the wooden steps that lead to the office, Darby rehearsed what he was planning to say. They were coming without. I just unstuck these pages. They were coming without an appointment, but they were confident Hilton would be in the office. It was payroll day, and he was always in the office when the money was handed out. It was as if he had to touch every greenback and see to it that the absolute minimum was paid out to the men who did the dirty work for him. Darby opened the door and stepped inside with Johnson and Appleby at his heels. Mary sat at her desk and looked up when the three men arrived. Mary's eyes caught Darby's immediately, and without saying anything, she communicated what's going on. May we speak to Mr. Hilton? Darby asked without any hint that he was fond of Mary. Yes, sir, she replied. Is there a problem in the mine? Darby did not want to answer. We need to take some matters up with Mr. Hilton. Darby tried to give Mary a reassuring smile. She was puzzled. She stood up and went into Hilton's office. The men heard him yell at her, but they could not make out what Hilton was saying. Mary emerged shaking. He doesn't want to see you. Payroll, he said. Take it up with the inside boss for your seam. Darby stepped towards the door. Mr. Hilton, I am the inside boss, said Darby tentatively. He was not afraid of speaking up, but Mr. Hilton was a powerful man, and it was dangerous to contradict him. Who the hell are you? Came a loud voice from inside the office. Darby Connors, the inside boss for Shaft 46. Somebody's been killed? Asked Hilton. No, sir, answered Darby. Then, he added, after a brief silence, not yet, sir. The three men heard Hilton's heavy wooden chair move back away from the desk. Mary quickly jumped into her seat at her desk. Johnson and Appleby stepped back, but Darby, Irish Railroad man Darby, stood his place. Hilton was angry for being interrupted. Actually, he was always angry, but on payroll day, this was an inconvenience he did not like. What do you want? He barked. Darby stood tall. May we come in, sir? Hilton looked at Johnson top to bottom. He knew Appleby, but he did not recognize Johnson. Who's this? He said pointedly. That's Mr. Johnson, miner in 46. And I'm Mason Appleby, hoist engineer. Appleby extended his hand towards Hilton. Hilton did not shake it. I know who you are. Hilton looked over the men. What do you want? Could we come into your office and discuss some safety matters? Asked Darby. There's nothing wrong with safety in my mind, said Hilton succinctly. Sir, if we could just, Darby began. Hilton noticed Mary watching and grinning. What the hell are you looking at? He snapped towards her. Mary turned her head to look at the desk and started shuffling papers. In here, said Hilton as he retreated to his office. The men followed. It was not a big office, but it was cluttered. With crates and papers. There were stacks of money on the desk where Hilton had been counting it out. He reached for the money and placed it in the desk drawer. You know I'm doing payroll, so make it quick. Darby cleared his throat. Sir, the men have been discussing safety. The men, scoffed Hilton as he cut off Darby. Sir, the safety conditions. What men are you talking about? Sir, just about all the men. Is this union talk, Connors? You know I'll fire three of you if this is union talk. Sir, continued Darby bravely, this is about safety. We have safety problems all over the mine. I run a safe mine. Everybody knows that, spouted Hilton pointedly. With all due respect, sir, there are some things that need to be improved. Connors, do you know anything about running a business? I have payroll to meet. I can't do that when production slows down or when lazy men refuse to work. My men are not lazy, said Johnson. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Connors here, said Hilton. Darby put his hand on Johnson's forearm and to hold it back. Johnson had obviously won plenty of bar fights in his day, and it was clear he wanted to take Hilton down. Appleby's knees started knocking, and his face grew pale. Sir, said Darby, the men don't believe young boys should be working deep in the mine. Put them atop to drive the mules here. Keep them in the breaker house. I don't need a railroad man to tell me how to run a mine, shouted Hilton. Is that what you're here to do? I should have known better than to hire a railroad man. This country is going to hell. No, sir. No, sir. We are trying to increase production. Hilton snapped his head towards the door where he could see Mary standing. What do you want? I have the production figures here. Every time there's an accident, we produce less coal, said Mary. Get out of my office, yelled Hilton. All of you. Appleby shot out the door like a bullet, coward. Johnson stood shoulder to shoulder with Darby. This mine is dangerous as hell, said Darby. He's right, said Johnson. Hilton looked at them with cold eyes. Then in a low voice, he spoke. So you two are some kind of leaders. You two are some kind of leaders. At least the hoist man had the sense to get out of here. Let me tell you something. There's a depression on. There are plenty of men to fill your shoes. I don't need some railroad has-been to tell me what's what in my mind. The driver boys work the mules on the gangways in the mine. They do that because they aren't strong enough to mine coal. When they get older, they move up to dig dirt. Later, if they're good enough and if they work hard enough, some of them might become miners. As for you, railroad man, the only reason you're here is because you know how to handle timber. But I don't like your attitude. I don't like you organizing my camp. Maybe you're with the Brotherhood of the Footboard. Maybe you're part of the National Labor Union. I don't know who you represent, but you will not represent the men I hire. Do you understand? Or do you understand me? Darby looked at him eye to eye. If I had a son, I would never let him work in this hellhole. If you had a son, Hilton laughed. Word is you don't have a son. Don't know you ever will. Well, no son of mine would ever work for you, said Darby loudly. So that's a threat, railroad man? No, sir, said Hilton. That is a promise. No, sir, Mr. Hilton. That is a promise. Darby stared at Hilton, and Hilton stared back. Get back to the shaft. Get some coal out of the ground. Consider your pay docked for the time you wasted in here. Then he focused on Johnson. As for you, miner, you're fired. Johnson lunged at Hilton, but Darby caught him and wrestled him back. Get out of my office or I'll fire the both of you. Get out. Darby pulled Johnson through the office door. Mary jumped up and opened the outside door. As Darby passed, she stuffed some papers in Darby's hand. Johnson was not happy about being fired, and Appleby was nowhere to be seen. Darby clunked down the steps and then looked at the papers. They were production figures with dates and lists of accidents. He looked back towards the office and saw Mary trying to hurry him away. Darby could hear Hilton rant from outside. Mary turned slowly and went back inside. There was a union talk after that, for certain. Within a week, there was another accident. 2 men were injured and 1 killed. Darby did organize that men and someone from the National Labor Union was seen on the property. Hilton hired a security man who fired shots at the men from the union. The workers staged a slowdown. Less coal came out of the mine, but it only hurt the miners who were paid according to the quality of production, their coal. Hilton fired anyone he caught talking union and made it clear that any drop in production would make it worse on everyone. They were already working 12-hour days, and Hilton threatened to increase it up to 14 if production did not pick up. Darby made trips to see Hilton every day, always attempting to reason with the owner, but seldom making any progress. He would speak to Mary as he came and went, and sometimes she would hand him documents. A time or two, their hands touched and lingered when the papers were handed off. Every day on his way home, on the train, Darby wondered and worried about Mary. He could not imagine the hell she was living. How she ended up with such a monster for a husband was impossible to imagine. The production figures and the other documents she gave Darby were conclusive proof that accidents slowed output, and Darby used that to build his case for the improved safety. The men indeed were organizing for better conditions, and Darby became a threat to ownership. He had a powerful voice, and though he received no concessions from Hilton, his word with the men controlled production. Then one night, Mary soundly knocked on Darby's boarding house door. Darby opened it slowly, and then more quickly when he saw who it was. Mr. Connors, said Mary with dread in her voice. Come in, said Darby. Mr. Connors, you must watch yourself. Darby looked both ways down the hallway near his room. He closed the door. What's wrong? There were men looking for you, said Mary. Men he's hired to stop you. Mr. Hilton hired somebody. Mr. Hilton hired somebody? Yes, that bastard, she said. Without warning, Mary lunged toward Darby and hugged him tightly. Darby held her. How do you know this? Mary started to cry. Darby held her and she placed her hand on his chest. Finally, Mary released her grip slightly and looked up at Darby. Her eyes concentrated on Darby's eyes. I'm in love with you, she said softly. Darby's heart thumped in his chest. How could this woman know how he felt? I get a feeling in my stomach when I think about you, she says. Darby clutched her tightly. I think about you all the time, said Darby softly. Sometimes I think about you too much. Mary felt flush. Darby's embrace was so strong and loving, something she desperately needed. She didn't want to let this man go. Mary leaned back and looked at Darby's face. I respect you, Mr. Connors, and I'm so attracted to you. You're everything I want in a man, and right now I want to kiss you. Darby looked at her as she slowly leaned toward him and kissed him. A little kiss, she said. Darby reached over and put his hand under her chin, and they kissed a second time. Tongues touching, Mary bit down on Darby's lip. Mary's breathing was quickened, and Darby saw her heartbeat in the blood vessels of her neck. Mary gripped Darby as she put her head on his chest. He stroked her hair. I had to come to you and tell you. I love you too, he whispered. I've loved you since those first days. Mary kissed Darby again. I wanted this, said Darby. Take me away from here, she said. I think about you and I worry about you. I want to be with you, Darby. Darby smiled to himself as Mary tried to nestle herself in his arms. He didn't think he'd ever heard her call him by his first name. Then she looked up at him with a glow in her eyes. Uh-oh. I want to make a baby with you. I want to give you a son. He'll never have to work this mine, and that bastard can go to hell. Darby felt a powerful emotion come over him. He never had a son, and he wanted one. But after May died, he didn't want to be with any other woman. Mary was different than all the rest. Mary was special. Mary was tough and beautiful and was lonely and afraid, and she wanted to be the mother of his child, a gift that he never thought anyone would give him. It was a generous gift, a loving gift, a gift that only she could grant him. I don't know what to say, said Darby. I don't know what to say to you, Mary of Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited. I think about you and I feel you physically, she said. I've thought about you. I've thought about coming to you so many times, but you're married. And it's so, said Darby. I don't care. You don't have a son, but you deserve one more than any man I know. I am in love with you, and I want your baby. No one has to know. The two loved each other that night, and all their worries disappeared. The magic, the passion, the love, the trust, all the emotions were there. They were one. Darby removed a leather note book from the counter and opened to a blank page. With an old pencil, he traced around his hand, and then he placed Mary's hand over the image from his and traced around hers. You are the sweetest and most loving girl I've ever known, Darby whispered quietly to Mary. The tender moments we shared tonight will never leave my mind. We will always know each other, and I will love you for the rest of eternity. Darby Connors was killed in a mining accident the next day. As he was being lowered into the shaft, number 46, the cable somehow came disengaged, and the cage fell 400 feet to the bottom of the seam. There was an investigation, but nobody was charged with murder. Though foul play was suspected, half the miners walked off the job, and soon the mine was closed for lack of labor. Mary left, right?
Wow.
Mary left the Pittsburgh Mining Company Limited before nightfall the day Darby was killed in shock, and she was never seen in Pennsylvania again. She had a son who grew up never having breathed coal dust or ever having heard of the cruel voice of Clarence Hilton. Sadly, the boy also never knew his father, or his real father. After Clarence Hilton, as for Clarence Hilton, after the mine closed and Mary left, he drank himself to death, slowly as a lonely man should, as he deserved. Oh my gosh. Mary found and took the leather notebook from Darby's apartment on, let's see, on her way out of town. And in it, she read some words she thought about for years. Look for me. I will find you. She didn't know what they meant or who wrote them, but she yearned for Darby the rest of her days. Thus end the longest chapter I recall, chapter 7. We're gonna start chapter 8, which leads us April 5th, 1956. So we jumped from April from 1871 to 1956. Hollywood, California. Unbelievable. She is just plain impossible. I will not under any circumstance work with her. No way. And we'll pick that up on the next read. Tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. for story time with your man, Mode Navarro and Mr. Guest, as we continue to read book 1 of the book series, Look for Me. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. This one was a lot longer than before, but it was an excellent read. Please feel free to comment your thoughts. Log in, or not log in, but subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you've missed anything, please go back and read. And I appreciate that. All the people that have tuned in, the people that have enjoyed it, YFL, all my Instagram people, my YouTube people. It's been fantastic reading for y'all. And we're going to continue to do this for as long as we can. Hopefully, we get to start filming here soon, some of the Creep Tale stuff. And then maybe we can get picked up. Maybe that story that I told Mr. Guest about some woman flying me out to Canada who was interested. Maybe that happens. Who knows?
Hey, let me ask you a question. What page are you on?
What page?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
You asked that a lot, Mr. Guest.
Well, I'm wondering how much of the book have you read?
143. I reckon that I am more than 2/3 in now. If I'm not halfway, I think I might be halfway into the book.
Well, that was a pretty intense chapter, I thought.
Yeah, it was really long. There's a lot going on. You could definitely sense that there was a love or some kind of a connection in the beginning with Mary and Darby. She was pretty assertive, if I might add. She just kind of knew what she wanted and went for it. I mean, with asking if he needed help reading the application, giving a pencil to write, taking her time to see about his needs when there were lots of other men in the office. She just seemed to know and gravitate towards him. And then she just came right out and was like, I'm in love with you. Like, yeah, that was already there. Unk enjoyed it. Appreciate that, Unk. Yeah, it's a lot going on. And of course, here we go again. He was in love with May, who was younger than he. If y'all remember, Darby's girl before Mary was May, who was a lot younger than he. And now May passed, and 20 years go by, and he meets Mary, and she's a lot younger than him. And you'll find that becomes a theme in this book, where as one lover dies, it's always 20 or so years later where they meet their lover again, whoever died. So if the male died, then the female dies, then it's kind of back and forth. So the female dies, she comes back, and now the male has died. Darby has been killed in a mining accident. Was it a mining accident?
But now you're talking, you've read half of one book, and there's 12 books.
Yeah.
Something else has got to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot going on
here.
You broke up on that last statement. Something else has got to happen. What?
I said, if you're halfway through the first book and we've had these characters and this is a theme, that can't go on for 12 books. Something else is going to happen.
Yeah.
It has to.
Most definitely. Most definitely. But I find it interesting that Darby dies after he stands up to the boss. All of a sudden, the cable stuff goes out. Never happened before. Didn't have a problem with that. They had problems with the shafts, the mining shafts, right? The timbers. A lot of water, a lot of moisture, a lot of the timbers giving way. And somehow...
Isn't that kind of how it works in real life?
It begs to remind me the question I asked you. The Titanic, was it an accident or business strategy? Was it a strategic move?
Could be business.
Lot of big money on the Titanic, and a lot of the big money that was on the Titanic weren't all in favor of the what was it? Their Federal Reserve Bank. And the Federal Reserve Bank people, or the people that back that thing, they don't like that too much. They don't like you going against their ideals. People come up missing. Titanic's sink. The world's strongest, world's safest ship runs aground on an iceberg, gets a hole cut deep into its hull, and is sunk. You can call me conspiracy theorist if you'd like. I'm just
John Kennedy introduced the United States note. In other words, he said, I'm not going to hand out Federal Reserve notes anymore. I'm going to create my own, the United States note. 9 months later was November 22nd, 1963. He introduces a competitive currency, and 9 months later, he's assassinated.
He's dead. Yeah, the Federal Reserve is not something that's going to be trifled with as far as it's concerned. You know, a type of money that exists but doesn't exist. The entity that heads that is also an entity that exists but doesn't exist. I'll leave that alone there. What are y'all's thoughts? What are y'all's ideas?
You know, it's interesting, Mo. The Federal Reserve was mentioned in the opening chapter, wasn't it?
In the opening? I think so, right?
I think I could be wrong.
She may have. Pardon me. I've been running a lot of errands today. We're painting the house. So that's funny. So I'm just double checking to see. I believe Lori did mention something like that.
She was talking to Wallace. She found him in the cemetery, and she was talking.
It sure is. Page 10.
What does it say?
I think it is a great retribution of wealth, continued Lori. I think it is all orchestrated by the big oil companies and the Federal Reserve. And if you ask me, they are manipulating this bust to cover their own mistakes. And I guess she was talking about how the Dow had just crashed.
So what's the date? What's the date on that chapter?
So that would have been 2008 Canyon Lake.
That's when the stock market crashed, the great housing bubble.
Ain't that something? And who was appointed president that year?
So are you telling me that this book is not just a 1,000-year love story?
I think it's a lot longer. I have,
mean,
I have a feeling it's I feel it's infinitesimal. I think it just goes on and on and on.
I mean, we just talked about a guy that organized a labor union in the mines
Yeah.
and got killed for it.
Yeah.
A working man got killed for it.
One of the better laborers, one of the better workers.
Yeah, I don't think it's just a 1,000-year love story.
Nah. I said it. I said it's a 1,000-year love story, but I think it goes a lot longer, a lot further. And I'm sticking with it. That's my story. I'm sticking with that. But Unc says Jimmy Hoffa. What did he say? Them black Suburbans going to show up at your house. Hey. At my house or at Mr. Guest's house?
Well, see, I'm at Bora Bora at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want, I can open the door and you can hear the beach.
I'm in Canada. Remember? So that is our time. That is our hour. We went way over an hour. We went almost 2 hours. So this the story time for an hour. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Guest. He had trouble getting on last time. Today, he got on plenty. He got on plenty and perfectly today. It's just he kept getting trapped in the last podcast for some reason. I want to take this time to thank everybody that's been watching on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and all the different platforms. I would ask that you guys click on to my subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch me there. If you've missed any chapters, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and click on the videos, and you can watch the replays so you can kind of get caught up to what's going on. Like I said, the goal for this is we're trying to get more people interested in these stories in this book as we are trying to film these things and hire people to act in these things in pushing that agenda. If anybody's interested, please write an email to thenovelist@yahoo.com and purchasing the books and anything that goes towards the books. If you guys buy the collection like I have, a small percentage goes to the Everybody Eats movement, and that's going to be used towards equipment and stuff for filming, anything that I already don't have and other things that I may need. And it goes towards, moving this project and this product. So if you're interested, please do not hesitate to write an email, send an email to thenovelist@yahoo.com. That is the novelist, like a person that writes a novel, thenovelist@yahoo.com. Inquire about the books, inquire about films and potential films and what's going on. And they will lead you in the right direction. Mr. Guest, is there anything else you may want to add before we log off for the evening?
Yeah, it was great, Mo. You did great. I think the readings are great, and so I'll say Lokanoch, E Bach, Dovidinha, Havala.
All right, and those are good night in different languages. I picked up Ukrainian or something. I picked up German.
That was all Croatian.
Croatian. Okay, so I said Ukrainian. Aren't they close? Aren't they a couple?
Yeah, they're one country away from each other.
Yeah. So okay, so I was off by a country or two. So Croatian. There it is. And I'll say in English, good night. Thank you guys so much, man. Mr. Guest, I look forward to this. And I look forward to talking with you more and more as I think now that it's cooling off, we should start planning on working towards some of these films and stuff like that. And we have an announcement. Eventually, we are going to introduce the author for a Q&A. So if people are interested in wanting to do that, I'm not sure when the date's going to be. I'll talk with the author, and then we'll make the surprise guest appearance. And believe me, you'll be surprised. The surprise
That'll be
guest
great.
appearance of who the author is, and you know what I mean. So yeah, and we'll do a Q&A and stuff like that, and kind of pick his brains on this whole love story and also some of his upcoming films. Awesome. I'll see you guys. Unc is in Mexico. I'm jealous, man. Where's my plane ticket, Unc? All right, guys. We'll see you guys on the next one, Tuesday, 7 o'clock. Story time live with myself and Mr. Guest. And yo, get childish with me, man. Let's read a book story. Ain't nobody doing that. Nobody's telling stories. Let's do it. We'll see you guys on the next one. I love you guys, Mr. Guest. I'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you guys on the next one. All right? Have a
You
good
bet.
night.